Today I'm going to share with you how to close your business. Ready? Let's do this. Hey gang, Jim Hart back at you here from Hawthorn Law, the Hart Law Firm. And today I want to talk to you about something that nobody's talking about, and that's how to actually close your business. A lot of people want to share how to open your business, and it is important to open a business, but there's a lot of people out there that might be thinking, well, I need to close my business. How am I going to do that the right way? So there are just as many legal steps, if not more, that go into winding down and closing a business than go into opening a business. And so that's what I want to share with you today. Who is this video going to be especially helpful for? I think it's important to understand what it means to actually close a business. And you know, you might be a solopreneur who's just deciding that you want to go back into the workforce. You might be retiring. You might be selling your business. You know, there's a lot of things that could be happening and reasons why somebody might want to close a business. Now, your business could be a small little, side hustle that you created, that you formed an LLC for, that you've been paying taxes on and generating a little bit of revenue on the side. It could be a full-fledged business with, hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue and lots of employees. Regardless of where you're at, everybody who starts a business at some point is going to need to think about how to actually shut that business down. And that's what I want to talk with you about today. I think the first thing that you need to understand is it really depends on if you have an LLC, there's going to be kind of one set of things that you need to follow. If you have a sole proprietorship, another set of things you're going to follow. If you're, in a multi-member LLC with multiple people or a partnership with multiple people, then there's going to be different things that you need to follow. So the first thing you need to decide is, what is my business entity like? Because that's really going to dictate what you need to do from here. If you're in an LLC, you should have an operating agreement. You're going to follow the rules of the operating agreement, which usually will lay out step by step exactly what needs to happen in a dissolution of the LLC. If you're in a partnership, or if you're a sole proprietor, I should say. If you're a sole proprietor, then you're not gonna need to worry about that as much, but you can follow the rest of the steps I'm about to tell you. If you're in a partnership or with multiple people, then you may have different issues that you're going to need to resolve. And a lot of that's gonna come down to, are all of you, or are you and all your partners, is the business as a whole just being dissolved? Or are you just stepping away from the business, maybe selling your share of the business to one of the partners? So that is going to play a little bit of a role here in what you're going to do moving forward. So for purposes of today, let's assume that you're just a one-person shop and you're either a sole proprietor or an LLC. If you are an LLC, then I would definitely consult with your operating agreement. You should have one of those drafted. I'll include a link down below if you do not have one of those drafted. If you're just a sole proprietor, then you can just disregard this first step and we'll move on to the next thing that you need to do, which is start thinking about or building a plan for how you're going to tell your employees. So if you're a sole proprietor, you might have some employees working for you. That's very possible. You may have some independent contractors working for you. That's also very possible. And regardless of kind of the situation you're in, if you do have people working for you, you really need to start thinking about, well, how am I going to tell them that they're going to be out of a job soon? Because that's something you really need to think about. So that would be the first thing. And depending on how long these people have been with you, depending on how much you compensate them, depending on if they're employees or contractors, especially if they are employees, you may need to talk to an employment lawyer to make sure you handle this the right way. But for most cases, it's just going to be a matter of being open and honest with your staff and letting them know, hey, I'm going out of business. Here's what's happening. And yeah, I'm sorry, but you've got, however much time you have for them to continue working for you. So that's the first thing, is you need to make a plan for how you're going to deal with your employees and how you're going to let them know that you're not going to be in business anymore. The next thing you want to do is you want to review all of your contractual obligations. These could be anything from contractual obligations you have with clients of yours or customers of yours, things that you need to fulfill for customers or clients. It could be vendors that you work with. It could be, maybe you have a marketing company that does a bunch of marketing for you and you pay them and you have a certain term to that contract. So you really need to take a really good hard look at all of your contractual obligations and make sure you're not violating any terms of those contracts. Because the last thing you want to do is try and shut down your business and exchange your business for a lawsuit. That's certainly not something you want to see happen. So review all your contracts. If you need help, obviously you want to engage the services of a lawyer to maybe help you understand what's going on and how to terminate these contracts properly. And so that's going to be the next obligation. I can tell you from personal experience, when we decided that we were going to be moving to Portugal, one of the big albatrosses around my neck was my office space. And so you might have office space. And so I had to figure out how was I going to get out of that lease agreement. And basically what I did is I subleased my space to a couple guys that have a professional services firm, and it worked out great. And so they've got the space and they're happy there. They pay me the rent that I pay the landlord, and it works out great for everybody, at least until the end of the lease term, and then I'm off the hook for it. So I've only got a couple months left. So that's kind of cool. But you need to think about those type of things, and this might take some advanced planning. This is not one of those things where you can just be like, okay, I think I'm going to shut the business down, and next week you close your doors. It doesn't really happen like that. So that's the next thing, is how are you going to get out of your contractual obligations, or maybe fulfill all of your contractual obligations so that you can part ways nicely with the other parties to those contracts. Coffee time. Still got the Portuguese mug. It's a little watered down today. I did like half a cup with coffee, and then it ran out of water in the machine, and so I poured more water into the machine. I think it reran the whole cup, so it's a little watery today, but what are you gonna do? Better than nothing. All right, so once you have a plan for your employees, you've got a plan for your contracts, the next thing you need to look at are all of your recurring payments. So I imagine you've got a credit card, a business credit card, or maybe a debit card that you use for your business, where you have monthly or quarterly or annual payments coming out. And so to do this right, you may need to pull 12 months of statements. And I would start with 1 month and say, okay, here are my monthly recurring charges. And then you need to look at, to see if there's any quarterly charges or 6 month charges or annual charges. The annual charges are typically going to be in the form of websites and domains and things like that. And so you want to look at all that, and you want to make sure you start the process of canceling all of those charges, so you're not going to have any charges coming out of your credit card after the business is actually wound down. Along those lines, you need to start the process of thinking about, what can you do with some of those business assets? You might be able to sell them. If you've got a website that's doing really well, you might want to sell that as opposed to just shutting it down. So these are things that you need to start thinking about. These are definitely assets that you could use as you're shutting down the business. So don't just assume that when you're closing the business, that means that you're just shutting everything down and going off to your next thing. You may actually be able to sell different parts of the business and actually, get a nice little chunk of change as you move forward. So I would say that's really the next thing, is to see if there are things from your business, if there are assets from your business that you can sell off. And if there are, then you might want to start looking to services that may be able to help you do that. And this could be as simple as listing the furniture from your business, like your desk or your couch that you use in an office or something like that, listing that stuff on Facebook Marketplace. Or it could be as more complex as taking your website and listing it on a website vendor that buys and sells websites. So there's all sorts of different options here, and so you need to be aware of that and think about that. And that's the next thing. Cancel all those recurring payments and or sell those business assets that you can sell. All right, the next thing you want to do is you want to cancel any other services that you haven't already thought about. So, this is going to be a nonstop process, I have to tell you. You're going to go through all those contracts, make sure you terminate all your contracts, go through all your recurring payments, make sure you terminate all those. And then I want you to do one more big look and see, is there anything else that I forgot about? Maybe insurance, or maybe you've got your car is in the business name and you need to switch it back to your personal name, or anything like that you need to kind of start the process of winding down. You definitely want to make sure you deal with and take care of that. So in addition to insurance, you may also have health insurance for the business that you need to wind down. So if you rely on your business for health insurance, you might need to start the process of thinking about another health plan. So these are all things to consider. All right, the next one on my list, we've kind of already touched on, but that's office space. So if you do rent office space, you want to make sure you sublease that, or maybe you want to time the dissolution of your business with the end of your rental term, or maybe you own your office space, maybe you own an office building, and so you need to start the process of either bringing in a tenant or selling that office space to somebody else. So those are some other things that you're gonna need to add to your checklist of items that you need to do as you're winding down the business. Now we've kind of started winding down all the financial commitments of the business. You're gonna need to, at this point, start to think about dissolving the LLC. But before you do that, I want you to go to your bank, and you need to talk to your bank about potentially closing the business accounts. The timing of this is going to be important because you want to do it right around the same time that you dissolve the LLC. But I would talk to your banker about at what point should you close out the business bank account. If anything, I would maybe, leave a little bit of cash in there and maybe leave them open a little bit past when you dissolve the LLC and file your last tax return, just in case something happens that you need something related to the business. But that's something you need to think about, is actually closing your business bank accounts. And then we get to the fun part. So you have to dissolve your LLC. So this isn't just something that's going to magically happen. You need to tell the Secretary of State, wherever your LLC is formed, that you're actually shutting down the LLC. And so that usually requires filing some paperwork. If you live in a state like Delaware, it's actually quite expensive. I think they charge like $300 or $400 to dissolve an LLC. But if you're in most other states, the fee I think is pretty nominal, and you just need to let them know, hey, the LLC is shutting down. There are actually, typically it's called articles of dissolution. It might be called something different in your state that you're gonna file with the state and let them know, hey, the business is shutting down, and so you don't need to send me those annual report notices anymore. So go ahead and do that, and then you need to file that and make an effective date of that. I will tell you, to shut down a business, I would typically, if you're thinking about doing this, you wanna have everything happen as of the end of the calendar year. It just makes it a lot simpler, especially with taxes and everything else. It can be a different date, but that just seems to be, in my mind, it always seems simpler to do it as of the end of the calendar year. So if they ask you for an effective date of when the dissolution is going to happen, I would say the end of the calendar year, and then the LLC will be no more. There will be no LLC. It'll be dissolved. I forgot something though. Before you dissolve the LLC, before you shut down your bank accounts, don't forget to run a final payroll. You need to make sure you run an adjusted payroll, talk to your accountant to figure out how much you should be paying yourself, especially if you're an S corporation, and run that final payroll for the business. Once you have canceled your LLC, once you have shut down the bank accounts, once you have paid your final payroll, the next thing you need to do is you need to go ahead and cancel your registered agent service. You can let whatever business or company you know that you no longer need them to serve as your registered agent, so they can file the paperwork for that. That may actually happen as part of the articles of dissolution, but you want to make sure that does happen. And then the last thing that's going to happen, and this is probably going to happen months and months and months after you finally dissolve everything and get rid of the whole business, is you are going to pay and file your final tax return. And so you may have state tax returns, you may have you're certainly going to have a federal tax return. If you're a sole proprietor, then you're going to do a Schedule C. If you are LLC that is taxed as a disregarded entity, you're also going to do a Schedule C. If you are an S corporation, you're going to have an S corporation return that's going to be due. So you want to make sure you do those final tax returns and let the IRS know that and usually there's a box to check for the business. I don't think this is the case for sole proprietorship. I just checked the Schedule C before I did this video, and it does not look like there's a place where you can tell the IRS that this is your final tax return, because technically it's you as a sole proprietor. But if it's an S corporation, there is a place to check the box and say this is my final tax return, and so they know that the LLC is no more after you file that tax return. If you want to learn more about how to start a business as opposed to shutting down a business, here's a video I did right here. Thank you for watching, folks. We'll see you next time. Take care.